When you 100% absolutely have to get to that flare across the river and you don't have time to muck around. That's right, fam. Leaping rivers, climbing mountains, nothing will stand between us. Well, hello there, humans, hippies, earthlings, whoever you are, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, and if you're lucky enough to be doing it too, welcome back to channel today. We're going to plumb the depths of knowledge, information, wisdom, and general game mechanics as we look at the 556 ARs. We're going to look at the SCAR-L, the QBZ, the AUG A3, the G36C, and the long-loved M416. Which you can see on your screen there. And we're going to find out a few very interesting facts about these guns. Firstly, they have the same damage numbers. We've tested this. They also have the same damage drop-off, i.e. none. We've also tested this. I'm not going to bore you with photos of me and my mates running around at Sanok Boot Camp. I'm also not going to bore you showing you every single spray in real time. But I did the testing, so sit back, relax, and listen up, and I'll feed you those numbers. The base damage on all these guns is 40 to a no vest wearing target. If you wear a level 2 vest or a level 2 helmet, it's 56 damage to a level 2 helmet, and your time to kill is 0.380. That's because they all have the same damage and exactly the same rate of fire. Look at this. They're all perfectly synced up, and they're all going to stop at exactly the same time. Let's wait for it, and then you can stop telling me that they have different damage numbers and different rates of fire. The thing that differentiates these guns is this stuff here, the recoil patterns of the weapons. The thing that was surprising for me is there is variance between the guns, but the AUG A3 does have a lovely spray pattern. The QBZ and the SCAR-L are extremely unpredictable outside of that first 10 rounds. But the M41 with a stock has a super tight grouping in that first 10 rounds, and indeed doesn't really spread its wings till 12 or 13 rounds in. And the stock is the big thing that increases the love for the M416. But you still do, if you hold these guns down, get wild sprays up towards the top. The AUG is the best of the lot in terms of that. So there is something to be said for that as a crate weapon. Except, if we look on the far right of screen, you see the G36C, and God help me, I don't know why that thing's not in a crate. That is the best, most superb recoil profile I have ever seen in all my livelong days. All you've got to worry with a G36C is about vertical recoil. If you put a light grip or a vertical grip on that thing, you're just going to shred. And I'm going to show you some examples of why it's so insane. But outside of that, you'd have to say that the AUG A3 is probably the best recoil profile following that. And after that is the M416. So if you're running any map, really, you're going to be running an M416 if you can get it. Unless you're on Vikendi, in which case you run a G36C. And unless you come across a crate, in which case you grab an AUG A3. The QBZ and the SCAR-L both work great as kind of the 556 version of an AKM, but they don't have the punch or the power of an AKM. So I'd just run an AKM if you wanted to run something for CQC that just had that extra oomph. 56 and a headshot for a level 2 helmet for a 556 AR versus 66 for an AKM, or 63 for a barrel. And I am doing a barrel versus an AKM video because although the barrel does have a marginally better time to kill, it doesn't have the punching power that an AKM has, but that's a whole other video. The joy of these guns is obviously that they have the ability to spray pretty solidly up through the mid-clip at range. And that's why you use them, the versatility. The AKM and guns like that, they struggle tremendously in the tight. They really, really do. But the outside of the tight, rather. Once you get to like this kind of range, you can't get that spray all the time out of an AKM. I have had people tell me, yeah, you can do that, and you can do that on occasion. But look, there is a best case scenario in this, and that's what we're talking about here. And that is that, look, if you're firing off a round that can do a 66 damage headshot, that's great. But at 60 meters, you're not going to hit often enough to make up the difference in the majority of situations compared to running an M416 fully kitted out with a compensator, a stock, and a half grip. What'll happen is the M416 will just hit more times. And when you're in the mid to long range spraying, then you want to run this gun. And that's a lot of the meta at the moment. A lot of people are adjusting their ADS to do a 6-time spray with the 556 ARs like the M416 fully kitted out. And yeah, like if you love that, that's great. This is where the SCAR-L really works well. the first 5 rounds in the QBZ and the Scarroll, they're basically the same gun, right? They will rip... something these guns are really good at is clearing people out of cars. The Scarroll and the QBZ are both really good in that first initial burst. Like, they're really good in that first initial burst. Very, very tight. But I don't think they're particularly better than any of the other 5.56 ARs in that particularly important area. And so if you're going to be running a CQC gun, then just run a barrel or an AKM, and you will get the same kind of deal. Now, the reason you don't do that on a map like this, Erangel, is because if you're running a gun like the Kar98 and you run a barrel or an AKM, you got to really watch your engagements, because you can get stuck when you... Oh, whoopsie daisy, not a great grin there, Mr. Potato Head. You can get stuck in those situations where it's great when you're in this kind of tight, but the mid-range can be dry, and if you end up in a final circle where there's a big open bit of ground in front of you and you're running in, and you've got to rely on your gun to clear targets at 75 meters, yeah, that's where you want to be running this thing, like an M416. That's where you can do full sprays with a red dot and be really, really accurate, so you can put a lot of pressure to bear on the enemy team, rather than if you let an AKM or a barrel run. And I did that AKM spray test yesterday, and I hope you all watched that. You will get wild variations, absolutely wild variations after about 8 rounds. Like, it's just throw them up in the air and see where they land. And that's why sometimes the AKM's great, and sometimes you're like, for reals? Like, you just drew an outline around a guy at 25 meters. You really must hate me. So until PUBG Mobile makes some changes to the Scarroll and the QBZ, I would use the M416 almost exclusively. Because if they've got the same rate of fire and they've got the same damage, I mean, sure, the QBZ works. Like, I'm not saying it doesn't work. It works a treat. But if they've got the same rate of fire and the same rate of damage, you use the gun that has the best gun handling. And that's still the M416 versus the QBZ and the Scarroll. So it's still the king of the mid-range. But if you get access to an AUG, hey, take it. It's got a better spray pattern than an M416. And if you get access to a G36C, you better sure as hell take that. Because I'm telling you right now, the G36C is a shred machine. I'm going to show you some clips from the G36C in a second. I mean, they all work up close. They don't miss a lot of shots. Like you saw, all these spray patterns are very, very, very tight. If we have a look at the G36C, I'm going to show you why it's so beautiful. And the reason for the G36C's love, and just ADS, you clown, is the fact that you don't have to worry about horizontal recoil. So when you're in situations where people are riding along, like look at this thing. It just sits at their headline. All you've got to do is start dragging your thumb down a touch. Look at it. I've never seen anything like it. It's absolutely broke. And it's clutch. It's so clutch. Long sprays with the 3 times. It just sits. Look at my health. Final circles. Running. Desperate to get it in. Like, I'll slow it down here. Look at the gun sitting. Just absolutely churning along on the one plane. Smacking that poor grub. Like, that's the G36C. And that recoil pattern you saw is not a mistake. It was so metronomic and reliable in all facets. Here we go again. It's just... I would run this gun all day if it was on all maps. I can't imagine that it won't get nerfed. The big problem I have with that is they probably won't even tell us when it gets nerfed. They are not big fans of sharing the information, and we have to really do a lot of deep diving to figure this stuff out. Anyway, thank you so much for subscribing and liking the channel. There's a lot of videos like this out there and a lot more coming up. I love doing this stuff. I'm a stat nerd and a bit of a geek, so you guys look after yourselves. Enjoy yourselves and just stay safe out there. Be pretty good humans.